Hi class, it's Mr. Fiore. Today I would like to start off with a few brief announcements before we go through the information on the slides again. The quiz that I originally said would be tomorrow is now on Monday. Many of you saw that probably in the backpack. Also, which is not on the slide, you have a current events assignment due on Monday. Please read the instructions for the current events assignment. Make sure you pick an article, right? No celebrities, no entertainment. You read the article, write a brief summary, or detailed summary, at least 5 sentences. It is worth 1 quiz grade, and please submit it back through eBackpack. Right, there is no due now today. All right, obviously I'm not in class, all right, so we won't complete a due now today. And I would like to get started with our notes. So if you can take out your iPad, open up your notes, and we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. We're going to start off today talking about the parts of the Roman Republic. Yesterday, I mentioned that the Roman Republic was a tripartite government, meaning it was a 3-part government. And the first part or component of the Roman Republic was the office of consuls, and there were 2 consuls that served as heads of the republic, and they were elected by a vote of the citizens of the city, all right, the city of Rome, and these officials ruled at the same time. Both consuls would rule for 1 year. All right, 1 year, and generally the consul candidates were taken from the membership of the Senate. So they came from the ranks of the upper class, because in the early days of the Republic, only patricians, right, were in the Senate. Each consul had full power as a chief executive, very similar to how the President of the United States is the chief executive. And in the Roman Republic, there were basically like 2 chief executives, but the consuls also had a judicial power too. Their power was limited technically only by the right of each to veto the action taken by the other. Right, so they did have a right to veto. They could veto each other. So let's say you have one consul that wanted to ban certain aspects of trade. In order for that to go into effect, both consuls had to agree. If one didn't agree, then the law was not passed. They both had to agree in order for laws to be passed. The next part or component of the Roman Republic was the Senate. The Senate was arguably the next level of importance, and the Senate was responsible for making the laws, and they would work closely with the consuls in the early days of the Republic to make laws. Later on in the Republic, some of the consuls started to separate from the Senate and worked on their own, issued executive orders, and they kind of, didn't get along as much. In the Senate, there were 300 senators. In the early days, there were patrician men, and when you were a senator, you were chosen for life. All right. Some senators would go on to be consuls, and then their position that was open would be filled by citizens with the right to vote. The Senate was basically responsible for handling daily problems of the government. Foreign affairs, trade relations, maybe certain crimes going on in the Roman Republic. That's what the Senate was responsible for dealing with. The next component or part of the Roman Republic was the praetors, and there were 8 officials. They originally started out as 2, but eventually they grew to be 8 officials that would interpret the law. They would interpret laws that were passed and part of Roman society and basically see if they are fair, if they need to be changed, and they would basically act as judges. Now, I bolded the word judges because they weren't the judges you see on TV, who wear the outfit and sit in a courtroom and hear 2 lawyers, plead the case. They basically would tell judges on how they're supposed to interpret the law and maybe how they should rule a case, whether innocent or guilty, or whether the law is fair or cruel, and whatnot. Now, you need to know these parts of the Republic. All right, 3 major parts. There's other parts of the Republic. We're going to talk about them shortly. Good way to remember these components or parts of the Republic is if you can think like the Roman Republic is a pizza pie. Right? The Roman Republic is a pizza pie. Now on pizza, one of the best parts of pizza is cheese. Right? And the first letter, cheese, the first letter of cheese is C. So cheese is the consoles. All right, big part of pizza. I mean, pizza without cheese is, I don't know, just bread and sauce. Then you have the Senate. First letter of the word Senate, S. All right, so, I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. Oop. I meant to put, not Senate, but sauce. Sauce is an important part of the pizza. The first letter of sauce, S. First letter, Senate. So if you can remember sauce, Senate. And then my favorite type of pizza is pepperoni. Maybe some of you would agree with this. Maybe some of you have your own preference. I probably spelled pepperoni wrong. It doesn't really matter. But the first letter of pepperoni is P, and Praetor. So you can think of some very important parts of a pizza pie as cheese, sauce, and pepperoni. I think those are, the biggest parts. Obviously dough, but that's, not going to help in memorizing the parts of the Roman Republic. So if you can remember cheese, sauce, pepperoni, remember consuls, senate, praetors. All right. I'll give you a second to finish copying anything down. I know you had to write a lot in this slide, and then I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, so in the Roman Republic, there were some democratic parts in which every Roman citizen could participate in. The Centuriate Assembly was an assembly controlled by patrician men. Only men, they had the right to vote. They had Roman citizens, so meaning they had a right to vote, pay taxes, they had to serve in the army. And the Centuriate Assembly was responsible for helping elect consuls, praetors, the 8 praetors, and passing laws. They would vote on laws and they would present them to the Senate, and the Senate would consult with the consuls to get the laws passed. Now, if you notice, from 590, if you notice on the slide, from 509 BC to 494 BC, there was no assembly that the plebeians could really participate in. So they did have a right to vote, but they didn't really have any assembly to go and use that right. So in 494, the plebeians went on strike. And if you don't know what going on strike means, it's basically, you see it today. You see a couple of months ago, Verizon, the company Verizon, there are a bunch of workers that went on strike and were marching outside Verizon stores with signs. Those people were on strike. They were not working. That they would show up to work, not work, and protest. They're protesting for rights or benefits. Now these plebeians, they're protesting for rights because they had little power in the Roman Republic. And after about 23 years, and the patricians realized they needed the plebeians. They make up 95% of the population. Some of the plebeians were causing problems in the military because they weren't serving, they weren't doing their job. And the government, or the consuls, senate, and worked together and formed a tribal assembly which was controlled by the plebeians. And this tribal assembly would elect tribunes, and they were government officials. They were pretty powerful in the Roman Republic because they would work directly with the Senate and the consuls, and they basically would bring about plebeian concerns to the government. And if plebeians felt as if one law was really unjust towards their class, that is something that they would present to the Senate. And they could also have the power to veto, or, as we know, it means to deny decisions made by the Senate and other offices, especially if the decisions made by the Senate and other offices were very unfavorable towards the plebeians. And finally, in 455 BC, the Roman Republic allowed plebeians and patricians to marry. And you were based on, and your class division was based on what class your father or the male was part of. So if you're a plebeian female, and you married a patrician male, then you would be part of the patrician class. If you were a patrician woman and you married a plebeian man, you were part of the plebeian class. Or, in some cases, I'm sure there's some cases where the patrician women stayed patricians and the plebeian men did become patricians. But basically, this law allowed people to kind of move between upper and lower class a little bit. I'll give you a second or two to finish copying things down on this slide, and we're going to complete one more slide of notes today, and that's the last slide for section 1. If you miss anything during this video, you can rewatch the video tonight on my website, and you can listen to this video again if you want to hear an explanation of the information on the slides. So another very important aspect of the Roman Republic is there was a certain component there are certain times when the Roman Republic needed one man to make a decision for the entire republic, for the entire country, the entire city. And they would appoint a dictator. Now, when we hear the word dictator, we probably think of someone who took authority, who took total authority by force. But in the Roman Republic, a dictator was one man who was appointed and given total authority to make laws, command the military, and they were given a term of only 6 months, and they were usually put in position during times of emergencies and dangers. The consuls would choose someone in the military, maybe a high-ranking general or a good Roman citizen, to become a dictator, and the Senate had to approve of that appointment, just like Donald Trump, made an appointment of a Supreme Court judge. The Senate has to approve it. Kind of same thing with like the dictator. And early Roman dictators were very different from more recent dictators that we know were pretty cruel and used their total authority for not great things. And these dictators served a term of only 6 months, right, to pretty much solve the emergency in times of danger. And these Roman dictators would take on the state of danger, the emergency, and then once the state of emergency or the danger was resolved, the Roman dictators gave up the power and went back to their regular, everyday lives, and they were usually limited to 6 months. One of the best-known early Roman dictators was a man named Cincinnatus. He was someone who was a loyal and devoted citizen. He was a farmer, all right, and he was in the Roman army. He was an officer in the Roman army, a very successful general, and the Senate chose him in the late 400s to be a dictator and solve a danger. The Romans were being attacked from the north by a group of people, and Cincinnatus they needed one person to make a decision. He defeated that threat using the Roman army, and then right after that threat was solved, Cincinnatus gave power back to the Senate and to the Republic, to the consuls, and he returned to his farm. One individual that we all know, George Washington, really admired this characteristic of Cincinnatus, someone who had total authority of the Roman Republic, a very powerful city that was certainly growing in strength, and he just gave up all power. Right? And if you know George Washington, or he probably could have declared himself king after the American Revolution, or he could have been president all the way till his death, but after 2 terms, he decided, that's it, I'm done. And George Washington, just like Cincinnatus, returned back to his farm. And you'll probably learn more about that next year. This is the last slide for section 1. All right, so if you want to write study to here for the quiz, I know my handwriting's sloppy. We are going to go through the notes that you heard through presentations the past 2 days tomorrow in class. I will be in class tomorrow. We'll also go over the section 1 worksheet, so make sure that's complete by tomorrow. And we'll do some review for the quiz. All right, if you have any questions, you can see me tomorrow morning. Again, if you've missed these notes, go on my website and view this video on your own time. Have a great day. And if you're not doing anything after school, come down to the Latin School wrestling match in the wrestling room. Should start around 4:15, 4:30.